Hey, what is up? Welcome to this featured Friday episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and gosh, I need to tell you how excited I am for today's episode because we have got an incredible guest. I've been so excited for this episode for quite some time now since our paths crossed, and I'm excited to share her story with you today because I am joined here in today's episode by Yeliza Centeio. She is a Hispanic woman, wife, and mother of two, and the founder and owner of Integral Marketing and Advertising. During her 15 plus years on the advertising agency side, she witnessed firsthand the impact that brands' distrust in agencies, we're going to dig into that in today's episode, had on agency growth. As part of the in-housing movement, a local Boston brand recruited Yeliza, where she experienced the difficulties of attempting to bring agency expertise and resources in-house, which is obviously a bigger macro trend that us entrepreneurs have the opportunity to understand and benefit from as we bring that into the marketplace. And that's when she realized that agencies still had a place in a brand's marketing plan, but the agency model had to change to accommodate the way that brands wanted to engage with agencies. This is so much of what we're going to dive into in today's episode. That was the base of her inspiration to launch Integral, a flexible, collaborative agency that provides clients with the support and expertise that they need when they need it. This is going to be a good one. Stay tuned because we're about to dive in with my interview with Yeliza Centeio. All right, Yeliza, welcome to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Awesome. So the one thing I didn't say in your intro, and obviously you heard me introduce you to listeners, but the one thing I didn't say is that you are a fellow Bostonian. So it's especially good to have you on the air here today.
Yes, indeed. I do bleed green.
Yes, I love it. Good old Boston Celtics reference, and we're like a minute in. That's what I love to hear on this episode. So, Yeliza, you did hear me tell listeners a little bit about you as far as the bio goes, but I want to go way beyond the bio in today's conversation. So, fill in the gaps for listeners. Who is Yeliza?
Yeah. You pretty much did wrap it up, but I, grew up in the Boston area. I was born in Puerto Rico and also partially raised there. And I grew up with, in a bilingual home and very fluent in both languages. And as I went to school and figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up type of thing and kind of immersed in my career, that bilingual aspect was really missing from the day-to-day operations in the agency world that I was in at the time. I fell in love with the media planning and buying. I kind of stumbled upon it when I was, just 20 years old and living in South Florida, actually, which that was something that wasn't in my bio. I actually lived in Florida for 4 years right after graduating college. And throughout my experience in media and kind of growing in that space, as you will, and becoming a leader at, media departments and other agencies, I realized that, firsthand the challenges that agencies were having in terms of attracting the old school type of client contracts that were 2 to 5 years, those long-term AOR commitments. The commitments were becoming shorter. And that was having a negative impact on staffing plans and budgeting, as you may expect. I then got curious and wanted to go brand side because I had been an agency my entire career. And when I went brand side, I went in with the expectation that we would be bringing an in-house agency. And so I started helping that brand transition away from the 3 agencies they were working with, started bringing those resources in-house and kind of helping strategically organize the department in a way where we could take in at least all the media, figure out ways around the creative, etc., and limit the number of outsource partners that we were using. And that was actually easier said than done. I think a lot of brands think, oh, it shouldn't be that hard. Let's just hire some agency people and bring everything in-house. But they don't realize just how expensive that is. And also when you're in-housing, now you've got people that can only think one way and are only working on the one brand. And I think that also limits the amount of expertise that can be brought into problem solving, which is an area that agencies really excel at. And it's a value of an agency that cannot be replaced.
Yeah, I love that for so many reasons. And first of which, I think that already, just in that first answer, there's so many brilliant takeaways for listeners to extract from that. Because the thing that I'm hearing is that you're very clear, and you have the luxury of having been on both sides of the coin, but you're very clear on the pros, the cons, the benefits, the drawbacks of all of these things, which I would imagine for you as an agency owner now, it really positions you in a great place to be able to talk to brands and say, hey, if you try to in-house, here are the real life problems that you're going to face, and here are the real life benefits. One brilliant point that I think you just made is that for you, especially you particularly with such a diverse set of experiences across different brands and different agencies, you do bring all this external knowledge and experience in case studies and data and what works and what doesn't work to all these different brands and companies. So I'd love to hear you talk about that, about the diverse set of experiences that you have and how that helps within one individual business.
Absolutely. And that is one key area that an agency brings to the table to any brand is that cross experience. I had worked at agencies where I would represent both B2C and B2B clients. And there were times where a B2B learning could be applied to a B2C client and have a similar impact. And, I think that when you in-house and you're just focusing your one industry and your one trade and your one competitive set, you miss out on being able to explore with other brands and other verticals and be able to extract some of that and bring it over to your own to see what might work, what might make you stand apart from the competition. I think, so many brands try to look at their competitive set and dissect all their movements. What are they doing? Why? Try and predict what their next movement's going to be. But the secret to what you may need to unlock may be in another brand. And I think that is where agencies are so quick and easy to be able to have those conversations with brands because they're constantly working on so many different problems and looking for solutions on so many different verticals that it's very easy to strategically think outside of the box to bring in new and fresh ideas.
Yeah, I particularly love this. It's been such a theme throughout our content here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast all through 2022, which I've been talking about. Like, for example, Yeliza, I am obsessed with chess. I'm obsessed with tennis. I'm obsessed with soccer. I have all these obsessions outside of business. And I always say to listeners and people in general that those obsessions give me an unfair advantage in business because there are certain things when I'm sitting over a chessboard where I realize, holy cow, like there's a concept called simplification, which is basically just like, hey, once you're winning, clear the path, get as many pieces off the board as possible because you're already in an advantageous position and every additional piece simply complicates the position, complicates the game. So I love that you're essentially talking about this within the world of agencies. I'm curious because I do think that this is your competitive advantage, what you bring to brands. Give us an example of something that, may traditionally be in a B2C environment that you've seen crushes in a B2B environment, or something that one industry is doing that when applied to another industry just crushes because of it.
Yeah, actually, one very simple, and speaking of simplicity, one simple tactic that can work well across either of those two industries is going back to the why. Going back to the root of the problem. In e-commerce, you're always looking to sell a product, and it's very easy for a brand to forget about their initial spark in starting the company, and they get too caught up in that ROAS, right? Everything is about, well, we spent $1, we need to get $1.50 back so that we can then invest those 50 cents back into selling another product, and so on and so forth. And they forget about presenting that value to the customer. And that's something that's very real in B2B. B2B, because it's more lead generation focus, and the transaction kind of takes care after the fact, after the marketing has been put into market. They are more about telling their story, coming to the potential customers and prospects with a solution to their very real and existing problem. And I always try to remind my consumer brands, let's take a little bit of that. Let's pretend we are B2B. Let's pretend our customers are just a lead. And let's stop trying to sell a product to them, and let's sell a solution. Let's sell our story. Let's sell ourselves. The rest will take care of itself.
I love that, particularly because I think this is something that entrepreneurs forget way too frequently, which is everything that we do is also a solution for whoever's receiving it. And in my line of work, in my experience, I've seen so frequently that entrepreneurs forget that everything is a solution and a sale. For example, when I see entrepreneurs running on their websites, they've got a landing page for a free ebook, for example. They forget that they need to sell that free ebook as well. Tell people why the heck they need it. And so I love your focus on solution oriented. And one thing I particularly love about your approach to solutions is that when you and I were talking before the show, I always ask guests, I say, what's your superpower? What's something that you're really good at? And right away, you didn't even hesitate. And what you had told me is, yeah, I'm great at being creative with any budget size, even small budgets. So I want you to talk to us about that, because for especially the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur audience worldwide, they're sitting here thinking, well, Yeliza, it's really cool. You get to work with huge brands and you get to help them make the most of their advertising dollars and you get to play with all that stuff. How the heck can you make these things work on a smaller budget?
Yeah. I think that's where I credit my experience quite a bit. I started working at larger agencies, but then throughout my career, I dabbled in really small agencies that had small clients and brands that we're working on, mid-sized agencies that had a mix of both. And so I have been able to work with brands that have $20,000 to spend for the entire year. And we need to figure out how to make that feel like $1 million to them and give them value, all the way to being able to spend $90 million a year, which you might think, oh, that's great, the sky's the limit. Not so much so. With more money comes more responsibilities and more metrics that you need to prove out. So, I have been fortunate enough to, and I think it goes to my personality, just build a tight network with sales reps and with other colleagues and other people in the space. And I have been able to leverage my relationships to be able to do almost IOU type of deals with vendors where it's like, hey, I've got this little guy. They're really a startup. They're doing good things. They're going to be big. Can we give them a break on this minimum and be able to run a campaign and show them what we can do, get them some results so that they can then spend a little bit more. And as they grow, you can become a value vendor to them as well. It's all about how you position a brand to vendors to be able to bend rules a bit. Another way is just being totally honest with the smaller clients and smaller brands, particularly startups, and saying, listen, here is what you need to get to your end goal, but we can't get there today. However, with the budget you have, here are some building blocks. They're going to help you along the way. We are going to be able to prove our value to you, and we'll get to where you want to get eventually, but we need these foundational items first so that you can start getting some momentum and be able to bring those clients into your business that will then help pay for further marketing that will get you the awareness that you want and that brand reputation that you're craving.
Yeah, Yeliza, this puts a big smile on my face because I think that you're representing Boston so well in so many ways right now, because it is that if I had to pick two words to describe the way that you are in your business and especially the way you are for your clients, it is you're a creative hustler. You will make it work given any set of resources in any situation, in any industry, any type of client. And this is the stuff that I love to hear because you are solution oriented. So it makes me want to go back in time and I want to understand, because obviously you've taken your experience, 15 plus years of being in the advertising world. How the heck did you take all of this, develop it into your framework, the way that you say, hey, you've redefined the agency model, and what was it like? Tell us about the building blocks of when you started your own agency.
Yeah, so I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Even when I was young, I really was convinced that I was going to be a fashion designer when I got bigger. That was my goal. I had been designing since I was about 10, 12 years old. I created my own prom dress for, junior proms and senior proms, etc. And I designed for other people and sold designs. And so I always did have like this find a niche type of spirit and fill it. And even through college, I was still designing and selling them. I, worked at a boutique when I wasn't in school, and I put on fashion shows for them to help bring in traffic, etc. And I was always looking for an opportunity to make money, whether that was writing essays for people or helping people with their homework or giving people ideas and getting paid for those ideas. And when I got into the media world in advertising and fell in love with it, fashion kind of fell to the wayside, but it didn't stop my entrepreneurial spirit. I then launched a cookie business, and it was an e-commerce cookie business. And when vendors came into the office to sell me on their media solutions and media products, I then sold them on my cookies so that they could bring those to their client meetings. And it was a great two-way relationship. And the cookie business was successful and all, but it wasn't the right fit for me. Then I started a fashion show production company with a colleague, and that was fun. And, it was fun while it lasted type of thing. And it gave us some money, but it just wasn't the right fit. And so when I found myself at a crossroads during the pandemic, I was hired by another brand to co-launch their e-commerce side of the business, which was a whole lot of fun and a great position to be in. It just didn't feel like my calling. And so I was going in every day and I was doing my job and doing an amazing job, but I kept wondering, and that entrepreneurial fire in me that exists with all entrepreneurs just wasn't staying quiet. And one day I was reading an article about how agencies are becoming extinct. And despite me having been at 2 brands at that point and having left the agency world, so to speak, I missed being on the agency side. I knew what areas were broken, so to speak, on the agency side, just from my own experience, and also from working with brands. I knew what brands wanted. And reading this article, I completely disagreed with it, and I was outraged. I'm like, agencies are not dead. Agencies just need to rethink how they pitch. They need to rethink their organization, and they need to rethink how they present their solutions. And it was almost like a flood open, and it hit me. And I decided in that moment, I remember I was sitting at my desk at work, and I was like, I'm going to start my own. And I know so many amazing, talented people that had lost their jobs during the pandemic, as well as people that were freelancing by choice, but didn't want to deal with the back-end operations of having to do invoicing and billing, etc. And I'm a collaborative person. I can't work by myself. While I had an opportunity to just be a freelancer and a consultant and make a pretty good living and kind of be on my own, I decided that wasn't right for me. And I sat down and I jotted down all the pros and cons that agencies have, as well as the pros and cons to in-housing. And the solution just started piecing itself. And that's where the puzzle pieces came from. It became, what is that missing piece of the puzzle? How do we help you solve that problem that you have in that moment without selling you the entire agency, which I think it's a downfall of a lot of agencies, that they're still chasing that 2 to 5 year AOR commitment. And so it's like, hey, you need a website? No problem. We'll build your website and do your marketing and do this, that, and the other. And, I've seen clients in pitches with their eyes just bulging, and they're like, okay, we appreciate that you can do all that. And you could see how they get overwhelmed. And I decided that I was going to go into market with a different perspective. And rather than selling all of our services, I just went in with, hey, what do you need today to build your business? What do you need today to bring in new customers? And we would help the clients with that particular problem that they had. We'll get a solution for them, and then we would move forward with other solutions if they wanted to. And fast forward 2 years, I'm so thankful to say that we have clients that are still on a project-to-project basis, and they will disappear for a couple of months, and then they come back to me and say, hey, we have this new issue. Can you help us? And absolutely, we'll find a solution for them. And if it's not a solution that I myself have a skill for example, media planning, buying strategy, etc., I do have the resources to be able to find them, whether that is a full-time employee, a part-time employee, or someone who just chooses to freelance and that's all they want to do. But I will manage everything under the integral umbrella. And that's a huge benefit for the clients as well. They don't have to worry about expensive overheads that are being passed down to them. They don't have to worry about super expensive FTEs that they're essentially paying for indirectly, because all they pay for is the service that they need at that time and the talents that they need at that time.
Yeah, Yeliza, I'll tell you what, from my perspective as a podcast host who's done 500 plus episodes, who's interviewed so many incredible people, you stand out for so many different ways, but chief among those ways is that, one, clearly you're brilliant at what you do, and I love the way that you think about these problems, but two, that leads me into the biggest point, which is, I think you've said the word solutions more times in one episode than anyone ever before, and I think that's amazing, and I'll tell you why. It's because I've interviewed so many agency owners, and the thing that we always hear from agency owners is, oh, our agency is different. But what I've seen from you, and obviously I've done a real deep dive into your business before we came on air here today, and the thing that so consistently shows up is, you brought it up, you beat me to it, is puzzles solved. It's the headline on your website. You've got puzzle pieces on there. I really like how you wrote all your marketing and advertising needs, or just one piece. And to me, it really is solutions oriented. And so I want to ask you, oh, and that's the other thing I wanted to add about most other agency owners, is that when they come on air, when they talk to entrepreneurs, when they talk to brands, they say, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to do this, then you need to do this. And of course, it's lined up with what their services are. Whereas you genuinely are talking about it from the brand side, from the customer side, from the business side. So I want you to talk to us about how you got that solution focused, and what your real strategy is to help brands diagnose. Because sometimes, I love that phrase, you don't know what you don't know. A lot of business owners don't know what they need help with. So walk us through that process.
Yeah, I actually have a perfect case study for that. And for obvious reasons, I won't name the brand, though they're still a client. There was about 2 years ago, a small brand came up to me and said, hey, we need paid search. I said, oh, that's great. We can obviously help you with that. We've got the expertise. I personally have been doing paid search for 15 to 16 years at this point. Let me take a peek at your website to make sure that before we activate a paid search campaign, that your website is set up properly to be able to receive that engagement. And that's because if your website is not up to par with what Google's expectations are and your SEO scores are low, you will then be hit with high cost per clicks on the paid search side and a low quality score. And I explained to the client how all the things tie together. It's not as easy as like, hey, turn on a paid search campaign. When we did this, we found out that their website wasn't a real website. The person who had developed their website had developed it using WordPress blog. So we were limited from an SEO standpoint pretty significantly. There were tags that we couldn't place. We were also limited on a paid search standpoint because we couldn't place certain conversion tracking. And so I explained to the client, while we can certainly help you with what you came here for, your website actually requires your attention more so than paid search. The client obviously was upset with this. They had just spent a great deal of money with a developer to create that website, but they understood that if they didn't fix the limitations on their site, that we wouldn't be able to track the results, and they would be paying more for their paid search engagement, and it wasn't going to look as profitable for their business as they may have hoped or heard it could be. So they followed our lead. We developed a brand new website for them properly, put all the right tags. We created their GA4 account for them in advance of the deadline. We put in all the proper conversion tracking for them, created their goals on their GA4, and made sure that that was tracking properly within their site. We made sure that their lead generation tool was properly set up. We gave them many options in terms of what would work based on the size of their business and what they should aspire to when they get to a certain place within their business. Once they selected their ESP, we hooked that up for them, and then we went ahead and created all of their SEO for them behind the scenes based on best practices, submitted their site maps, and just made sure that foundationally their website was top notch. Then we executed on what they came to us for, which was the paid search. And lo and behold, they are very happy with that program. We're still running it. It's generating leads for them. It's giving them the return that they were hoping for. And their cost per clicks are as efficient as we can drive them.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a great example of why we turn to others for their expertise. There's no way that that company would have all of this expertise. They shouldn't have it because they're busy being experts at their own businesses. So this is why I love hearing you filling that role as solutions provider, as problem solver for these businesses. I do want to switch gears. As we come towards the tail end of this interview, there's some things that I'm super curious about inside that brilliant mind of yours as an agency owner. And I want to hear about some of the mindset stuff that you've gone through as an entrepreneur. So take us through some of those highs, take us through some of those lows, some challenges, some obstacles that you've run into, and then how you've creatively solved your way through this.
Ooh, yes, that's a tough question. Just because, as you said, the highs and the lows, when things are good, they're good. And what makes business good is having clients and having that revenue come in, and having a team that is strong and reliable. However, people move around a lot. And I've had situations where I've started out with a strong team, and then one core person decides that they're going to move on and do something else. And no hard feelings. Naturally, on either end, people want to grow in different areas, and people have different visions for themselves. And we certainly respect that and reward that. But, having the talent can sometimes be an issue, and then going back into the marketplace and having to replace those shoes with someone just as good, if not better. And then there's the financial aspect of it. Making the decision to create a project-based agency versus an agency constantly chasing AORs does put you in a position where it's difficult to forecast a year. And it's feast or famish in a situation like this. And so business is good when the revenue is strong and money's coming in at very high rates. And then business is not so good and not so fun when there's a lag time between projects. And that lag time can be certain months, and there's uncertainty, and there are moments of desperation in terms of, oh my God, how are we going to make ends meet? How are we going to make payroll? How are we going to be able to invest in our own growth if we don't have a clarity in terms of when the next project's going to come in and that next big commitment? And during those moments, I just refocus myself. I have had those moments that I'm not proud of, where I've broken down, I've had my meltdown, because this is all new to me, just like any other entrepreneur is new to certain aspects of their business, right? I knew media as well as anyone. I can guarantee I'm one of the best ones in the Boston area when it comes to media, but I don't know all the aspects of business, all the ways that a business can surprise you, from taxes to HR to client relations and management of teams and projects, etc. You are going to make mistakes. And that's one thing that I have learned, is to be easier with myself when I make mistakes, because while I'm not new to advertising and media, I'm new to business. Even though it's been 2 years, I'm still new. I'm still a startup, just like all the other startups out there. And I don't know myself yet as an entrepreneur. I'm starting to get to know that person within me, regardless of how many experiences I have had. And I just recenter myself in the basics, going back to my network, going back to the people that know me and have had great experiences, and not being shy about asking for references, not being shy about reaching out and saying, hey, business is slow. If you know of anyone that you think is worth an introduction, please let me know. You know what services I'm able to offer, but just here's a refresher. And even going back to previous clients and saying, we understand we helped you with this project and you may not have any needs right now, but just wanted to say hello and see if we can get lunch on the calendar just to reconnect. It's staying focused on how things started, which was with that network, and just going back to that. And I think that as long as I can continue to stay focused in that way, we will, as a company and as a team, be able to make it out stronger than ever. And there will be lulls, and we just need to accept that, and we need to just plan for them.
Woof, Yeliza, that's one of my favorite answers in Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast history for a lot of reasons. I want to call out for listeners, go back and listen to Yeliza's answer there, because you will see an entrepreneur who understands the game, an entrepreneur who's committed to growth, an entrepreneur who's committed to persisting through challenges with grace and kindness to herself. Yeliza, I love hearing that. And it reminds me of one of my favorite concepts that took me a long time to learn as an entrepreneur, because I started my first business when I was 19, which feels like so long ago now. And someone once told me that the weights don't change, we do. And the realities of being an entrepreneur is that we will always face these struggles. We'll always face these obstacles and hardships. Those will always be there. And so the weights don't change, but we do. As we get stronger, those feel like lighter weights for us to lift. So today's breakdowns are going to be tomorrow's strengths. So I absolutely adore that insight from you.
I love what you just said. You just wrapped it up so perfectly.
Yes. So I will say, I love asking this at the end of every interview and episode because it's such a broad question. I never know what I'm going to get from guests, but I just want to ask you this very broad question as our last question here today. What advice do you have for wantrepreneurs and newer entrepreneurs?
If you truly believe that you want to make a difference or you have a good idea, just go ahead and do it. Don't be scared. I think a lot of people get scared and intimidated by the what ifs, and they wait for someone else to have the idea. Like I've heard so many people say, oh, I wish someone would do this, or I wish someone would invent this. Well, you just thought of it. Do it. Because the only way to know, it's doing it. And if you don't succeed the way that you envisioned, it's not a failure because you just invested in a lot of learnings that you can then apply to something else. And it's, keep it moving. You have that entrepreneurial spirit in you for a reason. The first business you start may not be the one that makes you a millionaire or takes off. Just keep trying, because with each try, you're getting better and you're learning and you're investing in your own education.
Heck yeah. Awesome advice there. And for every single one of you who's tuning into today's episode, I am sure that you are walking away from this episode with the exact same feeling which I have, which is, I want Yeliza in my corner. I want you to be fighting for me and finding solutions for me. The way you talk about how gently and brilliantly that you lean on your network and you look for referrals and you make sure people know what you do. I love your approach to all of these different things. You do it in such a genuine way, and you genuinely, deeply care about your clients' successes, and you're clearly a problem solver. And all of these things make me so excited to know that there's people like you out there working with brands, working with companies and entrepreneurs. So Yeliza, it's been so much fun. I want you to take the floor, tell listeners where the heck they can learn more about you, your work, where they can follow you, where they should go to see all the great things that you're up to.
Yes, so my website would be a great place to start. It's integral-mktgadv.com. So it's the abbreviation of marketing and advertising. And my social handles use the same type of setup. So I can be found on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn, so I recommend you follow me as a person, but also the brand.
Heck yeah. So all of you who are tuning in on the go, in your car, at the gym, wherever it is that you are, in the show notes, you're going to find links to Yeliza's website, to her LinkedIn, to all the places, because follow her. Success leaves clues, and you want to be surrounded by brilliant people like Yeliza. You want to learn from her. You want to see what she's doing. And I'm sure quite a few of you are going to want to reach out and say, Yeliza, how the heck can I have your brilliant brain working on my business? So Yeliza, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.